With Season of the Seraph, we got access to a brand new Stasis Pulse Rifle, which I think is now the best Stasis primary weapon in Destiny 2 for a few very specific reasons. The main one being that just like most Stasis weapons, this rolls with the perk Headstone, which is incredibly useful for Stasis builds revolving around breaking crystals for multiple benefits. But the main advantage that this has against all other Headstone weapons currently in the game is that it's actually usable in endgame content. On top of that, unlike all other Stasis Pulse Rifles that currently exist, this is fully craftable. Additionally, it rolls with the perk Rapid Hit, which I think takes the cake over all other reload perks for Pulse Rifles, other than something like Frenzy, which is just constantly up. And this is also a 450 RPM, which is a 4 burst, which in my experience tends to feel the best when used in endgame content as well. Starting with the perk Headstone first, although we do have a lot of great weapons that have the perk, realistically, none are great for something like Day 1 rating. Hand cannons like IS Luna feel great with this perk in low-end content, but hand cannons haven't really been meta for endgame PvE in a while. SMGs are great, but getting precision final blows against tougher enemies is going to be much harder, as each bullet is now dealing less damage and requires you to track to the precision hitbox for much longer periods of time. Autos tend to be in the exact same boat as SMGs, and then scouts are actually pretty good for landing precision final blows, but I tend to almost always prefer a pulse rifle before these unless I'm out of range. In my experience, in higher end content, especially contest mode, pulse rifles and SMGs feel the best of the primaries we have access to, and pulse rifles tend to land more precision final blows, making them a much better option for Headstone. All that being said, currently in the game, we have 4 options for Stasis Pulse Rifles. These are Syncopation 53, Stay Frosty, New Purpose, and then obviously Disparity, which is the focus of this video. Syncopation is a 340 RPM, which is an adaptive frame. In the first column, this does have access to Outlaw, which tends to pair really well with Headstone, but overall, adaptives tend to either be hit or miss with how they perform in endgame content. Specifically, different adaptives tend to feel different for some reason. Their TTK overall feels much higher, and it also seems to require more ammo per kill. And they also tend to take 2 bursts to flinch red bar enemies, as you can see in this lost sector, where I'm sitting at 16 under power. Stay Frosty, on the other hand, is a 450 RPM, but it is a 3 burst lightweight frame. This pulse in particular doesn't have anything great in the first column, and it is also Dawning specific, making it much harder to farm. Overall, the TTK feels better, but once again, you're going to see that 2 bursts are needed to flinch here. New Purpose is from Duality, which is a 340 RPM high impact frame. This is one of the easier weapons to farm in my opinion, but once again, the only thing super notable in the first column is going to be Feeding Frenzy, which tends to be harder to proc in endgame content at ×5, where you see the largest benefit. And just like all other 3-round burst weapons, it also takes 2 bursts to stun an enemy. Lastly, moving over to Disparity, which is brand new to this season and is a 450 RPM aggressive burst. This shoots 4 rounds in a single burst and has the highest impact of all pulses. Rapid Hit and Outlaw both sit in the first slot, which is great. And then as you're going to see in this clip, if you do manage to land all 4 precision hits, this will trigger a flinch in just 1 single burst. I know this seems like it's super niche, but in my experience, after flinching initially, it becomes much easier to land all crits afterwards, allowing you to perma-stun, rank, and file enemies. The only major downside I see to this weapon is that it does not have high caliber rounds, which also aid in flinching. Just to show how strong high caliber rounds actually are, adding this to my Syncopation, which was one of the worst feeling pulse rifles originally, it made it feel even better than a 4-round burst. This made every burst stun, rank, and files while under power, making high caliber one of the best perks for endgame content around the 20 under power mark. The reason that I still think Disparity is better overall is just because of everything else going for it. As I mentioned, the weapon is craftable, which means you can literally guarantee yourself a godroll. It is still the only pulse that rolls with Rapid Hit, which is better than Outlaw in endgame content. Outlaw does have slightly better benefits, but it always requires you to get a precision final blow, whereas Rapid Hit is going to be much more consistent and will also work better against tankier enemies that require a few mags worth of damage to take down. Lastly, 4-round bursts still have extremely good flinching, and the only way something is going to out-flinch enemies is if it rolls with high caliber rounds, as I went over, and you manage to get that on your godroll. Lastly, the reason that having Headstone is so good is because of the freezing capabilities and the fragment whisper of shards. Throwing this on any Stasis class allows you to get 500% additional base grenade regen for 6 seconds each time you shatter a crystal, with a 10-second max if you manage to shatter multiple crystals. On grenade builds for Hunter and for Titan, this is going to be extremely useful, and even on Warlock if you do choose not to run something like Osmiomancy Gloves. Titans also benefit from crystals as these leave behind stasis shards for them to collect, which can then proc Phantom Might through mods like Elemental Shards, and Warlocks with something like Ice Flare Bolts allows you to freeze more enemies, spawning Seekers much more often for better crowd control. I'm sure there are some other reasons that Headstone comes in clutch as well, but in my opinion, this is the first major time this perk is 100% useful on a weapon which you can take into the next day 1 raid. If you do have a solid syncopation with high cal rounds, as I went over, I do think that is going to be the next best option with Outlaw in the first column. Let me know your thoughts on the Pulse Rifle in the comments below, and if you are getting into end game content and higher end content in general, definitely give Pulse Rifles a try. I think these are the best option to run after SMGs, so this role is going to be my new go-to. I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch where we do low-mans and speedruns live. A link to that and my Discord server are both in the description below if you want to check that out. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.